This is Office Hours with SIU System President Dan Mahony, a monthly podcast that explores what's happening in and around American higher education. And now your host, SIU System President Dan Mahony.
Hello, I'm your host, Dan Mahony. I appreciate you listening to the first episode of our new podcast. This platform will provide us a chance to explore what is going on in the world of higher education, including some of the major issues and challenges. Each episode, I will be inviting experts to be guests on this podcast to discuss these higher education issues and often their experiences addressing them. Today, we're in Edwardsville. For episode number 1, we're going to explore some of the lessons learned that could benefit students, faculty, staff, and inspiring higher education leaders. And our guests are very familiar faces around our campuses: SIU Carbondale Chancellor Austin Lane and SIU Edwardsville Chancellor James Miner. Now, one of the questions I get all the time is, did you always know you wanted to be a university president? And my response is, I think that'd be a pretty strange 8-year-old to think I want to be a university president someday. So I certainly was thinking more about being a pro athlete when I was 8. But even by the time I got to college, I was thinking I was going to be an accountant and a CPA. I was going to start with you, Chancellor Lane. What were you thinking about being when you started college, and how did that change and evolve during your time as a student?
Well, first, thanks for having me on the first episode. I'm excited to be here. You know, I'm like you. I had absolutely no idea what a chancellor or president of a university even was. I grew up in more of a first-generation household, and so we did a lot of praying and I had a lot of hope about, doing something beyond what we were doing at the time. But when I got to high school, I was focused on athletics like you, but I was really focused on athletics and not so much academics. And my counselors would actually always really try to push me towards more of a technical or vocational track. And my mother said, no way, not that there's anything wrong with it, but she thought, nope, you're going to college somewhere. And it wasn't until I got to Langston University, I met Dr. Ernest Holloway, who was my president there. And I never forget, he pulled me aside and said, there is something you can do after you graduate. You can work with students. And so I got into student affairs because of that, because I just wanted to serve. So wasn't really caught up into any titles of being, never aspired to be a president or a chancellor, even when I started in higher ed years ago, but just turned out that way. And here we are still today serving students.
What about you, Chancellor Miner?
Well, I thank you for having me on the show. It's great to be able to do this. I did not have aspirations to be a university president or a chancellor. I thought I was going to be a professor. One of my intellectual heroes were all in colleges and universities, and I thought if I got a chance to teach at the university level, that would be my career. And so even as I started, I was an assistant professor at Michigan State. I received or been awarded tenure, been promoted, and I thought, this is great. I'm going to be a faculty member for the next 30 years. I am going to retire as a professor. Didn't quite work out that way. So no, not at all. It is something that happened along the way. And I feel very fortunate and privileged today to lead a institution of higher learning, but it is not something that was on my list early on.
So again, you both were college students, many years ago. What did you experience as an undergrad that you advise other students to do, and maybe something you learned that I wish I had done more of this, or I wish I had taken advantage of this opportunity? And we'll start with you, Chancellor Miner.
So we were college students many years ago. I need an extra many there. Yeah,
just being honest.
Many years
President
ago.
Mahoney?
It's a great question. I think one of the beautiful things about this role is you get to engage with undergraduates today. And when I stop students on this campus, I say to them, they're so far ahead of where I was as a first-year student or a second-year student. The thing that I thought I did really well is that I was serious, almost too serious as an undergraduate. And I was very much focused on doing the things that were required to be successful academically. And it is interesting to me when university students arrive to a campus for the first time, they're coming from lots of different high schools, presumably across the state, across the region, across the country, with varying levels of preparation. And it was interesting to me. In some of the courses, I was the smartest person in the classroom. And some of them I was not. And I think the thing that I did really well was to connect with people who were doing well in those classes. And so I found study groups. If you were the person getting an A in the course, you were my best friend that semester, and we were going to be studying together. And so it's one of the things that I suggest to students today is to figure out who those people are in those courses, and don't be afraid to connect with them to find support in the classroom. That helped me out tremendously.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I often say to students that sometimes you see your fellow students as competitors, and really they're potential collaborators. So the more smart people I could have around me, the better I did academically. What about you, Chancellor Lane?
I mean, to piggyback on that, it reminds me when I went to college, my mother would always say, birds of a feather flock together. And when I got to college, I was hanging with the wrong people. I was hanging with folks who were partying a lot and not really focused on maybe what their future was going to be. And it wasn't until I got with a different set of friends that I formed at the university. And our fraternity, Chancellor Mahony and I are fraternity members of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. I started to say, oh, wow, so this is what excellence looks like. I mean, folks are really striving to do well academically and thinking about their careers. So I would also add that I stopped listening to students for advice. so yeah, that's maybe a tip for students out there, especially with advising. Don't be advised by another student, because that'll get you in trouble. And also in my case, sometimes I even selected my major based on sometimes who the young lady was that I was interested in. So I, end up dropping a few classes because I end up making the wrong move following people again. So I think that's the biggest advice is, it's not a 4-year decision, it's a 40-year decision. So students need to really be thinking about the 4 years that they're on the college campus. Every move they make is going to determine really where they live, how their kids live. It's such a critical time in those 4 years that sometimes it's overwhelming, but I think when you're at places like SIUE or SIUC, and at least with all the support that's around, it will allow students to make those decisions that will help them out.
Now, eventually, obviously, we both went on for graduate degrees. Chancellor Mahony, you talked about, wanting to be a faculty member, and Chancellor Lane really working more in student affairs. Do you remember the moment where it's like, okay, I do want to move forward in administration in a major way and moving up to the Chancellor or President's role? And I'll start with you, Chancellor Lane. When did that happen, and how did it kind of evolve to that point?
Yeah, I think it was, so I always made sure I was in administration, but also teaching a course to be connected with students. And I think it wasn't until I became a vice president of student affairs at the time where a search firm really sought me out and said, hey, you ought to consider, this presidency at the time. Even then, I was just not focused on doing anything. I mean, you see the horror stories and you see all the pressure that's there, and you think, I don't want to do that. I'm fine where I am. But I started to realize after talking to mentors that, I could make a difference, right? I could work with students, faculty, staff, alumni, community members. And I think for me, it was just about how many more people I could have an impact on. Not so much about, again, being a chancellor or president. And people will tell you if you do it for the money, you're going to really be in trouble, right? Because you will never get paid enough, and that's not what it's about. So I think the ability to serve was what took me over the top, and knowing that I could have a wider impact on the campus community in being in this type of a role.
What about you, Chancellor Mahony?
It is a little different. I again, because I didn't aspire to be a university leader, the thing that I cared about deeply was the fact that the institutions were underperforming for students. And it was the thing that bothered me most. I am a lover of the university. I love being a part of a university community. I always have. I will always love being a part of a university community. I was intrigued by the puzzle of doing the things administratively that led to the institution performing better on behalf of a greater number or percentage of students. And so that was my intrigue. Maybe like Chancellor Lane, I was close enough to university presidents to not romanticize the role, right? I knew better than that because they were grumpy, they were tired. Most of them said it's a thankless job. They work really long hours, and they were public figures in a way that limited their sense of privacy. And I thought, I don't know if I want to do that. I just want to make the place better for the students who are arriving. And so that's how I started administratively, is trying to solve problems that improve the likelihood that a student was going to cross a commencement stage. And in doing that work, a number of people will begin to tap you on the shoulder and say, you should consider this. And so it wasn't until that started to happen pretty regularly that I thought, all right, maybe in service, it is a possibility for me, but it is certainly not where I started. And so I think today, if people ask me to describe the job or sort of what I find interesting, it is facilitating, curating spaces wherein the probability, the likelihood that a student will be successful goes way up. So I still enjoy that. When my feet hit the floor in the morning, I sort of run to this place with that in mind. And for me, that I find great fulfillment, enjoyment in that work.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. You both in different ways, I think, hit on that concept of impact. And I will say that same thing drove me as I moved up in administration in different roles. I kept finding my impact expanded. And I got to a point when I was a dean, I was like, I wanted to expand more. I will say no one tapped me on the shoulder, so you two must be more special than me. I just decided on my own I was going to do it. But that was really what drove me. And I think you hit on, Chancellor, mine a little bit. And my next question is kind of what do you enjoy most about the position, which you started to really hit on. And I know for me, it's always been the opportunity to work with and interact with students and watch them be successful. I'm guessing part of that's yours, but I'll let you answer it more fully.
Yeah, so there are two things. I mentioned being a lover of university community. So two things. One is the power of the institution to transform people's lives. That to me, to see that up close, I think gives me all the faith and confidence in institutions of higher learning. So I enjoy that. I think when you get to serve in these roles, you are here long enough to see students arrive to campus for the very first time. Some of them, they're being dropped off by their parents. And, this is an experiment for some of them, right? And if you're serving long enough, you get to see them experience their first year of college. You get to see them go home for the summer and come back a little more mature, a little more developed professionally. And if you're lucky, you get to see them graduate, and that same family, right, are now back for commencement. That life cycle of a student, I think, represents the power of the university. The other thing for me is I am so intellectually curious. The idea that I could walk to one corner of this campus and they're talking about corn to ethanol research and biofuels is curious to me. The fact that I leave and there are students who are rehearsing for a theatrical performance, and I leave that corner and I go to the next corner, and there's just sort of the intellectual diversity of a university community I also find very beautiful. And so I am equally interested in what our faculty are doing in their research in the classroom. And so when you put those two together, I think for me, that is the joy of being a university leader. There are lots of administrative challenges to solve for sure. But I encourage my colleagues all the time is to remind themselves of what they find to be beautiful about university campuses, because you need that as a counterbalance to the administrative challenges.
What about you, Chancellor Lane?
I think I have a real chip on my shoulder, like most of our students that are coming in, and I love to see them because I see myself in them, especially our students that come in through our Dr. Seymour Bryson Future Scholars Program. I would have been in that program, right? I would have been in that program because I needed more preparation to be able to do university work. So it's so amazing, as Chancellor Miner mentioned, when you can see those students come in and have that same chip on their shoulder. They've been told for years that they shouldn't be there, so they've got a bit of an imposter theory going on. They've never really been motivated or encouraged, and it's good to see when our faculty and staff put their arms around them, they take off. It's kind of like the Rosenthal effect. If you have someone who is pouring into you the belief that you can do it, regardless of your intellectual ability, you will actually rise to that person's expectation. It's amazing. And we see that happen every day. So that's what drives me, is the underdog student, the student that has the grit, the student that maybe didn't have all the confidence or have it all figured out, but they were able to develop along the way. So they're almost like an experiment. And then it's even better to see them with their families at commencement. And you're there, and you guys are there every year. And we say, how many of you are first time in college or first in your family to go to school? And, I think about how unique our institutions are, especially here in Illinois. If we were in Texas, I don't know that you'd get into our types of institutions with the academic GPA that we list. You'd be immediately going to a community college. You would not fit a university structure. So I think that's what's beautiful here, is we give students an opportunity to shine. Late bloomers, you name it, doesn't matter. I just love the way our institution attracts those students. We have a type that comes in, and it's just refreshing when you can see them succeed and cross the stage and do well in life.
Well, I think it's what you hit on was really important. Even the research indicates that the growth mindset of the faculty member is actually more important than the student's own growth mindset. The fact that people believe in you, and when you see that happen, and I've had lots of students like that who went way beyond, I think, what they thought they were capable of. It's a wonderful experience. Chancellor Miner started to hit a little bit on the challenges of the position. So I'll turn to you, Chancellor Lane. You can start with kind of what do you see as the greatest challenges in the position?
I think the biggest challenge is someone's inability to believe that we can accomplish great things. That's the biggest challenge in making sure that, and that's why our strategic plan is entitled Imagine 2030, because we do need people to imagine what's possible and sometimes impossible, and we need to be working together to make that happen. I think one of the things that keeps me up at night is when we don't have that strategic direction or plan. If we're getting off track, or if we're not focused on things that are going to impact our students. So I'm more about the social engineering of some of the challenges that are out there. We're always going to have, and we have in my 20 some odd years of doing this, the budgetary challenges. You're always going to have those things, and I think you can spend a little bit too much time crying about that. It is what it is, and you've got to work through that. But I look at more of, again, how we collectively work together to accomplish our stated goals that we have for the institution, and I use more opportunities than challenges, so people just kind of neutralize them right there. So we don't get off track. So I think, again, stuff that we've seen for years that we work through, but I'm more focused on that social engineering of the campus community stakeholders and what we do with them to make things work.
So this is it's interesting because you're trying to accomplish the mission of the institution, which most people believe in. But you're trying to do it in an extraordinarily complex environment. And so if you could just simply purely pursue the mission, it may be all joy, right? But to do it with aging infrastructure, wage pressure, political influence, this sort of balance of trying to keep college affordable and accessible while also trying to keep pace with the market pressures for the individuals who work here. And I think that is the sort of complexity of the role, is that you're trying to do something that we all believe has tremendous individual benefit, tremendous societal benefit, but you have to do it in an environment where the challenges and trade winds are very real. And I think that is what represents the complexity. We could probably spend the balance of our time talking about what those are. But I think the upside is that we all believe that the mission is worth enduring, solving some of those challenges so that students get to have the opportunities that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah, and kind of leading to my next question is, you talked a little bit about a lot of those challenges, but what would surprise people about your role as chancellor? What do people think it's like, and what do you find is maybe different than what they believe?
I think everything would surprise people. I think that there is this, idea or concept of what a university president and chancellor is and does. And I think most people, especially at a place like SIUE, would be really surprised by a day in the life. And so what would be the most surprising? I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. I think people see me at the grocery store and at the gas station, and they're completely shocked that I'm there. And I'm like, they're also looking in my basket, which I also find interesting. But they see me in community in ways that I think that surprise them. So I think that the maybe the most surprising is that we're sort of the chancellor. And I think people forget that you're a dad, you're a husband, you're a son, you're a community member, in addition to the role as the chancellor. And so it is sometimes the most mundane things that surprise people. I think for people to see me not in the shirt and tie is a really big surprise. Doesn't happen often. But when it does, it is almost as if the role, that you are somehow separate and apart from the role as chancellor. And so it's funny when you're doing the things that most people do, I think is shocking and surprising to people.
Yeah, I was going to say, reminds me, I was at an event one time back when I was a dean, and I was there in a polo shirt and jeans, and one of the students turned to the faculty member and said, "Is he allowed to dress like that?" And so, they were very much surprised
probably,
that my role as a dean and my role as a father and husband and just a community member. So, Austin, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think what's surprising is that people realize that I actually love what I do, even when days are bad. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I think some people say, you're crazy. I mean, why would you do this? I love it. I love to serve. I tell people I teach in the higher ed administration program on our campus, higher ed leadership. These are aspiring mid-level professionals that want to be a chancellor or president. And I'm pretty amazed they're saying that out loud, at this point. And I tell them all the time, are you sure? Can you endure a negative Facebook post? Mm-hmm. Can you endure a tough interview or someone that's protesting and saying you need to be fired? Can you handle that, right? Because the job won't look so luxurious, right? And so it's having those conversations with that level. And I think it takes a special person, not that anyone couldn't do it, but it takes a special person that really is doing it for the right reasons that we've been talking about for, 25, 30 minutes, very selfless reasons that focus on others and their success. And I think that's at least what keeps me going. But that's very important. But that surprises a lot of people, that we can take the hits when some negative things are out there, because we're so focused on the mission down the road that we don't allow that to slow us down. We continue and move forward.
Yeah, I used to always say back when I was a dean that if you believe what your mom told you that everybody loves you, go through a dean review, and you'll quickly find that's a myth. Yeah, you do have to have thick skin, but I think much like you were talking about, I love the job and I still enjoy it. And I think people are surprised that despite whatever criticism you may take or the difficulties and challenges, that it's still a really enjoyable position, at least in my mind. Talk to you both of you a little bit about hiring. So when you're hiring someone, what qualities do you look for? So some of the people listening may be aspiring leaders. What do you look for when you're hiring someone?
Well, you got to be able to serve. Everyone knows, at least in the years I've been here, if you're not willing to get your hands dirty, and what I mean by that is you see trash on the campus, pick it up. Doesn't have to be just the grounds crews. If you are walking by a student, say good morning. Right? If you're walking by faculty staff, have a conversation. You can't live in a castle if you're coming to work at SIU Carbondale. And I think that mentality has helped us become a real high-touch university. We're accessible to our students. They can get to me at any time, whether it's in the grocery store, as you mentioned, Chancellor Minor, or if it's on email, or a lot of students have my cell phone number. So we're very accessible because we want to make sure students know that we're here to serve them, faculty as well, and staff. So I think those are some real pieces, that when you're interviewing at our institution, you've got to be willing to join that type of team. And you've got to have, obviously, some experience, too, because a lot of the things that we are working through requires people that have maybe been in some roles before to know how to handle them. So when things happen, they're not panicked. They're not running around going crazy, but they're pretty calm and strategic and meticulous about how they go forward. So, I think those are the folks that we are attracting. A couple of years ago, I will tell you, it was hard to attract some people. Right? We didn't really have the strategic plan. We didn't have that confidence to bring in those leaders that we really needed, and that's changed a lot, I think, with the folks we've brought in. I got a great team in place now on my executive cabinet, and they all share that same servant leadership trait.
So I think it's pretty straightforward. There are three things that I pay really close attention to. One is whether or not the individual fundamentally believes in human capacity and the ability for the students we serve to be successful. And that may sound like a given, but there is some variation, right? For some people, this is not just a job. I think if you're working on a college campus, so I think you have to have a fundamental belief in human talent and ability. Number two, and for all students, right? I think you have to believe that every student here can be successful. Number two, I think you have to believe in our strategic objectives and missions. You can't have people on a leadership team who are rowing in different directions, moving in different directions. And so I think that's really important. And then the third, I use a really bad baseball analogy, so I'll apologize for it ahead of time. I say to people, you have to be able to play your position. If you're the third baseman, you can't play third base and center field. And so if we're hiring you to play center field, when a fly ball goes out there, we don't want to worry that it's going to be caught, or where to throw it when you catch it. And so it's a strange way to talk about it, but I think what I am suggesting is that people have a level of professional and technical ability to do the thing that they're actually being hired to do. And that is not always a given. And so those are the three things that I pay a lot of attention to.
Yeah, it's actually one I talk about a lot, is I want them to know their position better than I do.
Right.
Otherwise, It doesn't add a lot of value to the institution. Right. So last question real quickly. Start with you, Chancellor Minor. What would you like people to say about SIU Edwardsville 10 years from now? Where would you like the institution to be?
I would like people to say that SIUE is without question the most consequential institution in the region. That is my ambition for the institution, and I think that is attainable. I think there are a lot of elements of that today, but I think we need to do it so well that it becomes a part of the common refrain. So I want SIUE to be at the epicenter of everything that happens in this region in the best possible way.
Yeah, for us, it kind of takes me back to when I read about Delight Morris. He was so ahead of his time. And my hope is that we're classified in the same way, is that we were forward thinkers. We were always trying to make sure we were accessible to the folks that we served, so they would feel like they have an opportunity to better their lives and their families' lives. And then most importantly, as I mentioned earlier, that we were an institution that was high touch, that gave folks that maybe didn't have all the confidence they needed to go off and do great things. We talk about the economic impact and what our university does. We want that to continue going forward. We are essentially a powerhouse inside of our region. So I would hope that, and it's kind of funny, when you're 6, 7, 8, 9 hours away, there's sometimes more of an appreciation for the institution than it is 5, 10 minutes, down the street. So, I hope we're not just physically located in Carbondale, but that people really feel like we're the heart and soul of the region. And that's the hope going forward.
I think that's a good way to end. I want to thank Chancellor Minor, Chancellor Lane for joining us today. I ask you all to make sure you're subscribed to our podcast on Apple and Spotify so you don't miss an episode. And you can find our episodes on our website, siusystem.edu/podcast. As we wrap up our first episode, I will acknowledge our production team on Office Hours Podcast, SIU Edwardsville graduate student Solomon Amandi, and SIU system leader, the man, Solomon, and SIU system leader for marketing and communications, Katie Sheehan. I also want to thank Jason Church at WSIE Radio here at the SIUE campus for his guidance and letting us use the studio for recording today. And last but not least, I want to thank you, all of our listeners, for carving out time to listen to and maybe even learn a little bit today from our podcast. So thank you very much.
Be sure to join us next time on Office Hours for further conversation with the people who work in and study higher education. Special thanks to Kara Baldus-Merriman and Daniel Merriman for the use of their composition Writer's Block as the Office Hours theme song. And thank you for listening to Office Hours with SIU System President Dan Mahony.